What does a car really say about the person who drives it? Not the badge, not the horsepower, but the feeling it creates when you sit behind the wheel and let the road stretch endlessly in front of you. Some cars are built to shout their importance. Others are built to be understood only by the person driving them. And very few American cars ever represented that idea better than the Lincoln Continental Mark series. This was Ford's vision of personal luxury. Not luxury for chauffeurs, not luxury meant to impress crowds, but luxury designed for the person behind the steering wheel, savoring every mile the American way. If we had to describe the Mark line in 3 visual words, they would be long, heavy, distinct. For nearly 8 generations, these cars stretched across highways like moving monuments. Hoods reached forward like the bow of a ship. Bodies wrapped in chrome and real leather. Born in an era when Detroit believed luxury had to be large, had to have weight, and had to command presence on the road. The Mark series came from a time when dominance was measured in inches and mass. And yet, by the late 1990s, it quietly disappeared as the world changed direction. Fuel became expensive. Taste shifted toward efficiency. Heavy luxury coupes lost their throne, but the spirit of the Mark never truly vanished. So this is not just a list of models and years. This is a journey through a philosophy, a story of how America once imagined luxury on 4 wheels. To understand why the word Continental carries such a powerful aura, we must rewind to 1939, before the war, before mass production ruled everything. Back when vision came from individuals, not committees, the key figure was not a marketing team. It was Edsel Ford. He did not want a car that fit into the market. He wanted a unique car for a vacation in Florida. Something elegant enough for coastal elites and different enough to make people look twice. He drew inspiration from European design, long proportions and clean lines. He looked at the Lincoln Zephyr convertible and treated it like a classic suit that needed tailoring. What made the Continental special was not the chassis. It was the shape. The body was stretched. The surfaces were smooth. The flow felt like it had been drawn in one single motion. Under the hood sat a 267 cubic inch V12 engine. Not loud, not aggressive, but thick and smooth. It did not roar, it murmured. When Edsel arrived in Florida with this car, something unexpected happened. People did not simply admire it. They wanted to buy it. They wanted the feeling it created, a selective kind of luxury with a European flavor. Not flashy, not loud, just different. Ford recognized the signal and ordered limited production, and the name Continental was chosen with intention. An American car with a European soul. The first generation ran from 1940 to 1948, interrupted by war and reshaped by history. In 1942, the car became longer and wider, reflecting a growing nation. In 1946, it returned with a new grille, like a familiar face carrying marks of time. Then, in 1948, the story paused. Edsel Ford had died in 1943, and personal inspiration gave way to corporate strategy. By the early 1950s, Ford wanted something more than profit. They wanted prestige. A special project group was created under William Clay Ford, and they hired Gordon Buerig, the man who designed the Cord 810. In 1955, Ford went even further. They created an entirely separate division, the Continental Division. Its mission was simple but bold. Build the finest American automobile, no matter the cost. The result was the Continental Mark II, hand-built, finished in deep lacquer paint, trimmed with Scottish leather. No tail fins, no visual tricks, just clean proportions and restraint. Even the fuel filler was hidden behind the tail light assembly, a small detail with a big message. Luxury does not need to show everything. The price was shocking. Nearly $10,000. That placed it beside a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud. But there was a problem. Every car sold lost Ford money. So here is the question. Was the Mark II a branding masterpiece or a financial disaster? Either way, the result was brutal. The Continental division closed in 1957. The Mark II became a legend instead of a business. From 1958 to 1960, the Mark name survived, but the mission changed. Now the goal was to compete with Cadillac and Imperial, but at a lower price. These Marks became enormous unibody machines. They looked less refined and more monumental. Their most famous feature was the reverse-slanted breezeway rear window. It looked like wind was pushing against time itself. Strange, luxurious, different. Then, in 1961, the Mark name disappeared again, until one man changed everything. Lee Iacocca arrived with a strategy that sounded simple. Put a Rolls-Royce grille on a Thunderbird. And in 1969, the Mark III was born. It was controversial from its very name. It skipped history and called itself Mark III. The design was dramatic. A tall, upright grille, hidden headlights, a long, flat hood. At the back, a spare tire hump created a signature shape. You could recognize it instantly on the highway. Inside, it was a private lounge of leather and wood. Under the hood lived a 460 cubic inch V8. Not sporty, but heavy and confident. The Mark III sold better than the Cadillac Eldorado. And this time, Ford made real profit. Luxury, finally, was profitable. If the Mark III was the calculated comeback, then the next generations were the moment Lincoln began to enjoy its victory. In 1972, the Mark IV arrived, built on the same platform as the Thunderbird, but with a different purpose. It was still long, wide, and heavy, but its lines were softer and more relaxed, less aggressive, more indulgent. This was no longer a car trying to prove itself. It was a car that assumed respect. Under the hood sat the familiar 460 cubic inch V8, paired with an automatic transmission. It moved forward not with urgency, but with authority. A steady shove rather than a sudden leap. In 1973, Lincoln introduced one of the most symbolic features in the Mark series, the opera window. A small oval window placed on the C-pillar. It had no real technical purpose. It did not improve aerodynamics. It did not improve visibility. But it told a story. It told the world that this was not a sporty coupe. This was a rolling salon, a place where light entered gently, just enough to create atmosphere rather than function. By 1976, the Mark IV had become a platform for fashion. The designer series packages appeared, with names like Cartier and Givenchy. Each version was more than a car. It was a style statement on wheels. Then came the Mark V in 1977, and everything was pushed to its absolute limit. This was the longest two-door coupe Ford had ever built, nearly 230 inches long, a number that sounds impossible today. And yet, people loved it. Sales reached astonishing levels. More than 228 zero-Zarin cars were sold in only a few years. But beneath that glamorous exterior, reality was changing. Fuel prices were rising. Emissions laws were tightening. The era of excess was ending. To save fuel, the standard engine became the 400 cubic inch V8 with a two-barrel carburetor. The famous 460 remained available, but only as an option, and not everywhere. In California, emissions regulations made the 460 difficult to offer. And as fuel economy standards tightened, the 460 slowly disappeared from the Mark V lineup. In 1978, Lincoln introduced something surprisingly modern, an LED display that showed the remaining distance before the fuel tank was empty. That same year, the Diamond Jubilee Edition appeared, celebrating Ford's 75th anniversary. It became the most expensive car the company sold at the time. The Mark V was no longer just transportation. It was the peak expression of the personal luxury philosophy. But the world was about to force Detroit to change. By 1980, fuel crises and government regulations pushed American manufacturers into downsizing. The Mark series could no longer survive on size alone. And so the Mark VI arrived. It was built on the Panther platform, shared with the town car and full-size Ford sedans. The body was shorter and more squared. The drama was reduced, but the idea remained the same. This was still a private lounge for the driver. For the first time in its history, the Mark line offered a four-door sedan version. For many loyal fans, this felt like a betrayal. The Mark had always been a symbol of the personal luxury coupe. Now it was admitting that the market itself was changing. Power was also pulled back to earth. The most common engine was a 9-liter V8, tuned for smoothness rather than speed. It moved the car gently, not forcefully. To compensate, Lincoln leaned into technology, digital dashboards, keypad keyless entry on the door, features that made owners feel like they were buying the future. Then, in 1984, the Mark series changed personality completely. The Mark VII arrived. It was sharper, younger, more athletic. It moved to the Fox platform, closely related to the Mustang. Because of this, the driving experience changed. The car felt tighter, more responsive, less like a floating living room. The Mark VII also introduced composite headlights, modern integrated units that replaced sealed beams. This made the front design more aerodynamic and more European in character. The most important version was the LSC. This was the Mark that could actually perform. With four-wheel ABS and air suspension, it was no longer just about comfort. It could handle speed with confidence. And hidden deep in the options list was something strange and fascinating. A BMW turbo diesel engine. A German diesel engine inside an American luxury coupe. It sounded wrong, but in a strange way, it was exactly right. It showed how desperate Detroit had become to adapt. By 1993, the final chapter began with the Mark VIII. It arrived like a sudden jump from VHS tape to widescreen film. It was still a luxury coupe, but now its power came from technology rather than mass. The Mark VIII was built on its own FN10 platform, separate from the Thunderbird. This was a statement that the Mark still deserved its own identity. Under the hood sat a 6-liter DOHC V8, producing around 280 to 290 horsepower. It was smoother, more modern, and willing to rev in a way the old big block engines never needed to. The design followed the same idea: curved surfaces, aerodynamic shape, soft lines that let air flow around the body instead of crashing into it. Inside, the cockpit wrapped around the driver. This was no longer a drifting lounge. It was a focused command center. But even the Mark VIII could not escape the shift in taste. By the 1990s, the American market was moving toward sport sedans, and then toward SUVs. The idea of the personal luxury coupe no longer ruled the road. And in 1998, the Mark series ended. Concept cars hinted at its return. Names like Mark IX and Mark X appeared in sketches and prototypes, but none reached production. Instead, Lincoln adopted the MK naming system: MKZ, MKS. History was replaced by letters. The Continental name returned in 2017, but the Mark badge did not. It was as if Lincoln chose to remember only part of its past. And now we arrive at an honest conclusion. The Mark series were never perfect cars. They floated. They were slow to respond. They were sometimes excessive. But they were unforgettable. They represented an idea that no longer exists in the same way. Personal luxury defined by size, comfort, and presence. So here is the question I leave with you. Should Lincoln bring back the Mark as an electric luxury coupe for a new era? Or should legends remain untouched, preserved only in memory? With that said, thanks for watching. Until next time.